Welcome, salutations, good evening. What did we look at in the previous lesson with greater detail than chapter and book? Yes. Compromising and taking in other people that they should have killed. Yes, the people of Gibeon, these we talked about the compromise and the deal that Joshua and his people made with the people of Gibeon. Anything else? Yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sister, brother Junior. She conceded. Go ahead, brother. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make a comment on this, and I jotted down in my Bible. Can't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah. Well, they did definitely. They definitely did. Used a level of deception that appealed to the. Basically made them a low risk investment. Their appearance, what they carried with them, and the way they talked, all led the people of God to believe that they weren't a threat or a ally they should be worried about taking. Honestly, from the way they talked, they didn't even sound like they were from Canaan. That maybe they had come from another country somewhere else, which would have made it safe to invite them in. Unfortunately, they were just over sitting in the other holler, and that didn't work out real well for me. Anybody else? Sister John, I think you had your hand up next. Yeah, there was in the compromise, they allowed themselves they allowed an opening for enemies, and actually, I think that's what we're gonna see today. I almost think that's a pretty good segue. Jared, if everything's okay, you don't have to sit right on top of it unless you just want to. I know you got your Bible in a whole other place. I think that's a good segue into what we're going to talk today, that this alliance that they made with Gibeon, it led to vulnerabilities. And like Sister Donna was saying from the previous lesson, where we talked about how once you lose that ground, you can't regain it again. Once you've made that compromise, you're tied to that compromise. You're part of your identity is attached to that compromise, even if you decided to go back on it. Now, it says very clearly in chapter 9 of Joshua that the princes of Israel swear by the Lord to the Gibeonites. So once they made that covenant before God to these people, there wasn't a thing they could do about it. That was just as binding as the very salvation that some of us claim to have, just as eternal. And in making that compromise, anytime that we make that compromise, we are going to allow problems. And I think that's where we pick up in chapter 10. Now, it came to pass when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho her king. So he had done to Ai and to her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them. They feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all the men thereof were mighty. Wherefore Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Hoham, king of Hebron, unto Piram, king of Jarmuth, unto Japhiah, the king of Lachish, and to Debir, the king of Eglon, saying, Come up with me, and help me, that we may smite Gibeon, for it hath made a peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. Now, word travels fast. And I don't. That's a very, very common and colloquial saying, but I think it holds true, especially when we mess up. When we mess up, word travels fast. Any Joe Blow down the road here can make a mistake that we would deem egregiously sinful, and some people will take notice. Most people will just move right on past it, because nothing is expected of the lost. Nothing is expected of the world. They go after their own desires, they follow their own desires. But when you mess up, everybody hears about it. And the fact that they had destroyed Jericho, they had destroyed Ai, and that the inhabitants of Gibeon, and this is the big one, had submitted themselves to the children of Israel and were now living among them. It says, and they were with them. They were that everybody hears about it. And I don't think you could take this as an exact, corollary between life, because they began to act out of fear. But the world will then seek opportunity to press their advantage. As Sister Donna said, as a little point that we made from chapter 9, is that once you give up ground, it is very, very difficult to regain it. Once you make that compromise, and people hear about it, and they will, whether it is your own family, whether it is other churches, and most likely other people in the world, they're going to hear about it. And once you make that choice, once you have made that decision, the opportunity for others to press the advantage will appear. And that's exactly what we see here. Adonizedek, this king, a king of Jerusalem, did not make his decision to attack Israel directly. No, that would be too difficult. Assailing, and I think oftentimes the devil's smarter than we give him credit for, far smarter. I think he is predictable in some of his tactics, because he always targets the flesh, because it's the one thing that he has great manipulation of. But as far as being dumb, I don't think that he's dumb. And Adonizedek, like the devil, was going to target where Israel was the weakest, where Israel would have the biggest, the lowest defenses, if you will, and that was this city of Gibeon. So, and this is another thing. When it comes to being attacked by the devil, a lot of times it's not just a singular point of pressure. You're not all of a sudden going to just have one thing pop up in your life. It's going to be multiple things. It's going to stress. Anytime anything's going on spiritually, whether against you, that you're doing good for the Lord or that you're doing poorly for the Lord, the stress from work's going to kick up. Everything in your house is going to break that week. Everything. The kids are going to come down with some great illness. You're gonna start experiencing you're gonna have auto trouble. And then you're also going to have whatever this great temptation is slide right in there too. And Adonizedek did the very same thing. He's like, I really can't fight this thing by myself. So what he does, he goes against 5 of his buddies. And he says, hey, let's attack Gibeon, because that is the weak point. We know for sure Israel has made a pact with Gibeon. Gibeon is their weak point. Joshua and his bunch are set up in Gilgal. There's no assailing that camp. You're not going to come out. You're not going to come out and face them head on, and the devil's not going to come out and face you head on. The devil's not fighting with Revolutionary War tactics. He's not going to line up in a field, and you're going to stand on either side, and he's going to fire a volley at you, and you're going to return a volley, and then you're all going to sit there and reload. No, he's going to come at you with subtlety. He's going to use the Navy SEAL, the SEAL Team 6 type tactics. They're going to go in. He's going to come in. He's going to do his damage, and he's going to leave before you even know that he's been there. And that was the plan here. So he gathers this army of 5 cities. Therefore, the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, gathered themselves together and went up, and they and all their hosts, and encamped before Gibeon, and made war against it. And the men of Gibeon sent unto Joshua to the camp to Gilgal, saying, slack not thy hand from thy servants, come up quickly and save us, and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the mountains are gathered together against us. See, this is the problem with making compromise. That compromise is your point of ingress. What do we talk about the phalanx? If one man lets his shield down, the entire phalanx is compromised. That is the weak point. That is the place where you apply the greatest pressure. And Israel, who would have had the opportunity to approach each of these 5 cities as they had done Ai and they had done Jericho and take them individually, are now faced with a situation we have to take on an army that is 4 times greater than we would have if we had just been able to take each of these cities in turn. Why? Because they made a decision to compromise with Gibeon. They could have rolled over that hill onto Gibeon, taken Gibeon, and moved right along. Maybe Jerusalem would have been next. Maybe Jarmuth would have been next. Whichever one of these cities they came across next, that would have been their next target. But they compromised. They let their guard down, and now they have a greater force pressing right against them. And that is how the devil works. He is going to take this point of ingress. He's going to take whatever it is in your life that you're letting your guard down on, and we all do it because we're all fleshly, and that is where the pressure is going to be applied. And in the meantime, he's going to use all these other stressors in our fleshly life to weaken us. He's going to apply that work stress. He's going to apply that family stress. He's going to apply maybe even some spiritual stress. I don't believe that saved people can be possessed, but we can be oppressed. The devil can assault you directly if he desires. He's never going to take you, but all he needs is to apply enough pressure so that you bend and then break. That's all he needs. Let's continue. So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said to Joshua, fear not, for I have delivered them into thine hand. Therefore shall not a man of them stand before thee. Joshua therefore went up from them suddenly, and went up from Gilgal all night. And the Lord discomfited them before Israel, and slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them all the way that goeth up to Beth-Haran, and smote them, and Ezekah, and unto Makkedah. And It came to pass as they fled before Israel and were going down to Beth-Haron, the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died, and they were more which died with hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. Now, the difference between the way that we often deal with these pressurized situations and the way that Joshua was blessed to have dealt with this situation is they had the Lord with them. And oftentimes that's not where we turn. When work stress comes down on us, what do? We work harder. When family stress comes at us, we try to spend more time with the family. When spiritual stress gets on top of us, a lot of times this is the opposite of what you're supposed to do. We turn away from spiritual things because it's easier to avoid the situation than to actually face it head on. And we invest more of our time in these things than turning to the one person that can actually do something. Now you look at this battle where they approach the 5 kings. Very little of Israel fighting is noted here. It said that the Lord discomforted them, and I want to point this out. Let me turn my page, and they're stuck together. It said, verse 10 said, the Lord discomforted them before Israel and slew them with a great slaughter. Now, I'm not no great English major, but it says that the Lord discomforted them, and slew them. Now, the noun that the verb slew is referencing is still the Lord. So, Israel didn't do a lot of fighting here. The Lord, I think it probably is something very similar to what happened with the Midianites, if you remember the story of Gideon. And the Midianites, where they basically just turned on each other. They were so confused by what was going on, they turned on each other and started slaying one another. Now, that could have happened. It also could have been angels. We know that the Lord will attribute a host of his angels to his people if he so desires. You can look in Kings and look at Elisha, and he wants Elisha's servant to be able to see all the angels around him, and the mountains and hills and hollers were full of them. So, whatever the situation was, the Lord fought most of the battle here for them. And then, when they started chasing them, so the children of Israel they apply more pressure. And they start chasing them, and then the Lord starts raining literal hailstones, big old chunks. It says great stones. So these aren't your little pebble-sized hailstones that you get right now. These aren't going to put a pockmark in the hood of your car. No, these were rocks raining down from heaven. Literally artillery fire from above. And it rains down on them, and what Israel slew versus what God slew was a minuscule amount. Now, when we have these troubles in our life, when we feel that pressure from the devil, when we feel that point of ingress being pressed, and like I said, a lot of time it's going to be your first symptom of this is going to be outside stress pressing on you, and then you're going to know, hey, what's something's going on. And now I'm not saying that life's going to be perfect, and it's like, well, if you live a certain way, you're just going to have a stress-free life. Well, that's inaccurate as well. I'm just saying these are the ways the devil oftentimes will pressure us. Now, we need to turn to God. God again, and I said this at the beginning of the class, and I think the idea still holds a lot of merit in this, that we don't have to fight our battles. We're conditioned and told to pick up our sword and charge on the battlefield, and that's exactly what you should be doing. There were Israeli soldiers on this battlefield. Who was doing the chasing, if not the people of Israel? It also says that the people of Israel got some shots too, because it didn't say that they didn't slay anybody. It just said God slew more than they did. So it's not that you're not supposed to be out there. It's that you're not the only one that has to do the swinging. And we rely on ourselves so often to do this thing. You know what? You didn't rely on yourself. Those of you that are saved, that are truly saved, you didn't rely on yourself for your own salvation. You didn't and I don't understand why we feel like we have to rely on ourselves for our daily fights. But it's so much easier, and I guess maybe we get far enough away from our salvation that we forget. But it's so much easier for us to lose faith in what God has the power to do and to effect Well, he saved my soul, but I need to do this. He saved my soul, but... And I think some of it honestly comes down to, and we are taught to be separate in the Bible, and that's something that we can do. But I think the mentality of we have to do something overrides the ability to just let God take care of it. He doesn't need... Never has He needed our help. Again, with your salvation, your involvement was that you were present. That is it. That is your involvement. And I don't understand where we get off thinking that when it comes to fighting the devil, that I have to fight an archangel by myself with all the weaknesses that I as a human being possess and all the advantages that him as an angel that he possesses. Why do we think we have to take that fight? The God's already won that fight. He smacked the devil right out of heaven and a third of his angels with him. He's already won that. And he'll win it again. And he'll win it again. That's the thing. He's won that fight. He won it whenever he was on at 40 days after he had a fasting. He won that fight. He defeated death, hell, the grave, and the devil on Calvary, and on his resurrection. He defeated him there. He'll defeat him again at the last battle when he comes down and he steps out and he crushes everybody, and he'll defeat him again when he comes back 1,000 years later. God's not going to lose a fight with the devil, so why are you trying to fight it? We need to be present on the battlefield, but we need to be trusting in the one who has the actual spiritual power. You look, and I think a good example of this, if you look in Acts, where it talks about the 7 sons of Sceva, where they tried to cast out a devil. Father says, and they said, Paul I know, and I forget who, and Jesus I know, but who are you? And then that devil goes on to beat the tar out of them and strip them naked and run them out of the house. That is our personal effectiveness against devils. We don't have any. And it's like, well, the devil's not, whatever's in your life, that's not the devil attack. Well, who is it? He is the great accuser. He is the opposer. Satan actually means opposer in Hebrew. That's exactly what he does. And it may not be him in person, but he is the one pressing these advantages. He doesn't like us. He doesn't like you. He loathes you. He loathes himself. Let's continue. Before we get too far behind. And then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and said, in the sight of Israel, sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou, moon, in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemy. Is it not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down about a whole day. And there was no day like it before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of man, for the Lord fought for Israel. Now, Joshua needed more time. See, the battle was going good, and they were running out of daylight. And Joshua said, I know somebody who can take care of this problem. And he stood up and he said, the sun's going to stand here and the moon's going to stand over there. And it was twilight. Have you ever been of an evening, a summer evening, and look, and the sun's over here and you actually see a trace of the moon out that way? He said, I need everything to stay right the way it is, right now. I need this to halt. And we're going to go on. And it stayed that way for 24 hours. It said, about the space of a whole day. 24-hour period of sunlight where they kept pressing the advantage. See, when we have victory in the Lord, we got to press the advantage. And I know a couple weeks ago we talked about rest, and rest is important. But when the enemy's on the run, this isn't the time to stop. This isn't the time to lay down and say, oh, they're far enough out, we'll worry about them another day. No, press your advantage. And it says and there was no day like it before or after, that the Lord hearkened unto a voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. So there's never been a day like this again, according to the Bible, that the Lord hearkened to a man. It said that God set up the sun and the stars and the moon. They're not astrological signs. They are foretelling the times. If anybody wants to know what other worlds and all this stuff in space is for, it's a gigantic clock that God set up for us to know when things are taking place, what time things are taking place, and I think you can look at it. You look at the three wise men that came to visit Jesus. What were they looking at? They weren't looking at their clocks. They weren't even necessarily looking at the scriptures. What were they looking? They were looking at the timepiece that God gave them. They looked for the stars. And God held that. God stopped the stopwatch and says, "We're in overtime. I'm hitting the button. We're going to take care of this." And then it says, then the Lord fought for them. That the Lord pressed the advantage. Not only did see, I think the Lord was encouraged by Joshua's actions. He's like, not the Lord has slew them, we've slew them, we're pressing them, but there's just not enough time left to finish this job. So I'm asking you, Lord, just give us a little bit more time. And the Lord said, we're gonna halt time, and we're just gonna do this thing, and I'm gonna fight with you. Now think about, we don't often think about God having reactions like we do, and I think He's higher. He's a higher consciousness. He's a spirit being. He's way beyond, but He's encouraged by our actions. Why do we pray? Not because He needs to know He knows everything we need before we ask Him. Why? Because our prayers are a sweet-smelling savor to Him. We do it because He enjoys it. He likes it. And this, I think the Lord was just thrilled to be with Joshua. I think the Lord was like, my people, for the first time in many, many years, and all you have to do is flip through the Pentateuch and the early part of the book of Joshua, and there wasn't a lot of God's people pulling in the same direction that God was pulling. There were moments, but I think for one of the first times in history, God's like, not only are my people doing what I want them to do, but they're asking me to pull along with them, to help them, to do more with them. And you know what? Not only am I going to do am I going to grant what they ask, they're going to get a bonus. I'm going to fight with them, and he does here too. And Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, unto the camp to Gilgal. But these 5 kings fled themselves in a cave at Makkedah. And it was told Joshua, saying, the 5 kings are found in a cave at Makkedah. And Joshua said, roll great stones upon the mouth of the cave, and set men by it for to keep them. And stay ye not, but pursue after your enemies, and smite the hindmost of them. Suffer them not to enter into their cities, for the Lord your God hath delivered them into your hand. Now, what can we glean from this? Well, first of all, when we finally turn, whatever it is in our life that is attacking us, when we finally turn their backs, we need to keep pressing the advantage. More than that, too, is when we finally catch up to them, and they did catch up to these 5 kings. This was an opportunity to stop. Joshua said, just lock them away. Set a watch on them. And keep pressing your advantage. You're winning right now. Don't stop now. And so when we overcome some of this stuff, we don't need to stop and just dwell on it. We don't need to stop and stamp it out. And we do need to be careful. And I think they were being careful here. These 5 kings, they wanted to make sure they couldn't escape, so they put big stones in front of the door. And they set a watch on it. We have to watch these things in our life. We have to pay attention to them. But when we're fighting in the battle, we got to press the advantage. It's not time to stop and deal with our personal issues. We're having victory with the Lord. This isn't time to wallow in what has attacked us. It's time to press. And they did so and brought, I think I have pushed on past where I was at. And it came to pass when Joshua and the children of Israel had made an end of slaying them with a very great slaughter till they were consumed, the rest which remained of them entered into fenced cities, and all the people returned into the camp at Makkedah in peace. None moved his tongue against any of the children of Israel. Then said Joshua, open the mouth of the cave, and bring out those 5 kings unto me out of the cave. And they did so, and brought forth those 5 kings unto him out of the cave. The king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon. And it came to pass when they brought those kings unto Joshua, and Joshua called for all the men of Israel, and said unto the captains of the men of war which went with him, come near and put your feet upon the necks of these kings. And they came near and put their feet upon the necks of them. And Joshua said to them, fear not, nor be dismayed, be strong and of good courage, for thus saith the Lord, for thus shall the Lord do to all your enemies whom against ye fight. Now, what do we do? Now, I said we can't dwell on them, we can't wallow in them, and we're pressing the advantage. We have to do it, but the battle is over. They have fought the battle. They have won the battle. They have utterly destroyed their enemies. And now again, I think we can bring up that it's time to rest. They return to the camp, and now we're gonna address the problems that were plaguing us. And they roll these stones away, and they bring these 5 kings out, and I'm sure they toss them on the ground there before Joshua and said, Joshua says, bring the leaders over here. Put your foot on all their necks. He says, the way that you're standing right now, the way that you have these men down and prostrate and trodden underneath you, the Lord's going to do that to all of your enemies. And He can. He can do that for every problem in your life. He can put your foot with His power. He can put your foot on their neck. Whatever that you're dealing with, but you have to be willing to fight. You have to be willing to go to war with Him. You have to be present. And I think so oftentimes we just turn the other direction, or we're trying to fight one king at the time, or we're just oblivious to it. We submit, we yield to when in a day. Well, I mean, probably 18 hours if you, or well, no, probably 36 hours if you read this story correctly. But in a short amount of time, these things can all be laid at our feet. And then, whose is the glory? Joshua doesn't say, the men of Israel did this. He said, no, the Lord's going to do this to all your enemies. The Lord. This is His power. The victory that you have gained is all from Him. And afterward, Joshua smote them and slew them and hanged them on 5 trees, and they were hanging upon the trees until evening. It came to pass at the time of the going down of the sun that Joshua commanded, and they took them off the trees and cast them in the cave wherein they had been hid, and laid great stones in the cave's mouth, which remain to this very day. Now, this ritual of the hanging and everything, as I was trying to think about where is our personal application, I think this ultimately comes down to, first of all, praise to God. When Brother Larry is in service, he says, does any of the men have anything else to say? This is your opportunity to tell everybody about the victory that you have gained. Why did they hang them on the trees? As a warning to anybody else what was going to happen to them, and also show God has put these people down. This is the work that He's wrought unto them. It was an example. It was a display of their power, of their victory over them, and that's our opportunity to do so. And also, I think sometimes when we don't want to address that stuff because it's also that was a display of the weakness of Israel too. They had made that covenant with Gibeon, and that was the result of it. But still, despite their weakness, God gave them the victory over it. And so sometimes I don't think we want to do that kind of stuff because we don't want to show ourselves as having made a boo-boo, made a mistake. Because the evidence of it is hanging there before everybody. And then they took them out and they threw them in the cave. And they said they set stones at the door. They threw them back in the cave where they came from. They set stones at the door. Whatever the sin is, or whatever the thing is that is pestering us, remember that it is buried deep for the saved person. It is buried deep beneath the blood of Christ. There was a stone at the door. There was a rock, if you will. Nobody's ever going to think about them people again. Nobody's ever going to be wondering whatever happened to those kings again because they've been buried. They've been put far away. They're under. And all has been forgiven. I think a lot of times we will take these. We will leave the kings hanging. We will leave these things in our life to present, and we'll revisit it, and we'll wallow in it, and we'll take it, and sometimes we'll fall to it again, over and over and over. We have to put these things away and put them out of our mind forever. Just seal them up. Be gone. Be done with them. Bury them. And Joshua took, and that day Joshua took Makkedah and smote it with the edge of the sword, and the king thereof, and he utterly destroyed them and all the souls that were therein. He let none remain, as he did to the king of Makkedah as he did to the king of Jericho. And Joshua passed from Makkedah and all Israel with him to Libnah, and fought against Libnah. Now, the rest of the chapter goes through, and it is Libnah, and then Lachish, and then Horem, and then Eglon, as he goes and he defeats these cities. The rest of the chapter talks about the cities of these kings where he just utterly wipes them out. And it's almost a repeat every single time. I don't see the point of reading through all of that over and over. But they press the advantage and they wipe it out. They completely remove all these people. And in verse 40, so Joshua smote all the country of the hills and all the south and of the vale and of the springs and all their kings, and he left nothing remaining, but utterly destroyed all that breathed, as the Lord God of Israel commanded. Again, we go back to where we started at the very beginning of this thing, following God's plan. Stay on the plan, do the plan, complete the plan, work the plan. And Joshua smote them from Kadesh Barnea even unto Gaza, and all the country of Goshen, even unto Gibeon. And all these kings in their land did Joshua take at one time, because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. And Joshua returned, and all Israel with him unto the camp in Gilgal. Now they go back and they rest. They press the advantage. They have the south. Basically, if you really know what you want to know what they have conquered, they've got the land of Judah. They have reclaimed what will be in the future the southern kingdom. If you want to look at like the Chronicles and the later kings, it will be where David will set up his throne. It'll be where Solomon reigns from. Jerusalem was mentioned. Now, Jerusalem wasn't always the city of God's people. David will make it that later on. But for now, they have reclaimed. They've reclaimed what would be, I think, if you look at the scriptures, one of the crowning jewels of the region. They have gained a very important thing. And why? Because they pressed. And did they have some fall downs? Yes, I think you can read from when did the campaign actually start? Chapter 6, chapter 5, chapter 6 to chapter 10, and there were some missteps. Let's review. Well, I don't want to review. I know them. Do you know them? What were the missteps they made on this southern campaign? They tried to take Ai in their own strength. While what else was going on? Achan sin in the camp. What else? Other missteps.
They made a compromise.
With who? With the people of Gibeon. I think this southern campaign is a really good example of Christian life, because it doesn't mean everything that Israel fell down on is stuff that we fall down on every single day. Did that make them any less victorious? We're human people, and that's not an excuse, but that's just a reality check. You're not going to live perfectly. You can try, and I think we should try. But you're not going to do it. If I believe that was possible, I might as well just go up and sign up with the holiness people, because eventually I may achieve sinless perfection. I might just pop on out of here. But that's not reality. That's not the real world we live in. We're going to fall down, but that does not make us any less able to have a victorious life, to have a victorious time, to take the battles that we were always meant to take. Just because you're falling down right now does not mean you can't stand up. Just because there's sin in the camp does not mean that you can't take care of that and go beat that one little thing that's been knocking you around. Just because you've compromised on one thing does not mean that whenever that compromise becomes an issue, that you just need to fall down and fall prostrate before 5 other things that are going on in your life. No, it's time to press the advantage. With who? Not of your own power. You can take and the Word of God is powerful. In fact, it says it's sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of the soul and spirit. This is a very powerful book, but you can't wield it by yourself. You don't have enough strength in your arm to fight your own battles. The only way you're going to do it is if you have God on your side. And we're not going to have Him on our side if we allow these things along our campaign of life, if you will, to slow us up. We're not going to have His power and ability if we're not pressing with His plan. We're not going with the thing that He wants us to do. Important things to think about. Are there any questions or comments about chapter 10 or any of this first big chunk of Joshua here? I don't know if we're going to let it off here, but if we're going to move on to something else, but this seemed like a really good capstone to this earlier part of the book. So I do want to review it in its entirety if you have any questions or comments about the entirety there. Yes? Praise the Lord for it. Oh yeah. Well, and as I say this, and it hopefully doesn't sound like I'm berating, because I'm right there in the middle of it with you. You know, I'm no great thing. I fall down every single day, and most time I fall down and I split my noggin on the way down. I'm sorry. Yep, we have to press on, and first step is finding God's plan. That was the first step for Israel: is finding the plan, getting with the plan, and working that plan. I think so much of our life is spent with our hands in our pockets. I just don't know what to do. I don't know where to go from here. You're a vessel. You're a warrior. You're not meant to sit around. Run drills or something if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. But we have to be in it. Anybody else? All right. That is going to wind us up for today. And like I said, I don't know. We may press up a little bit further in Joshua. This may be it for it. But today felt like a capstone. This was the end of that southern campaign for Joshua, and I think this is a big moment for Israel. I think this is where Joshua went from warrior Joshua to leader Joshua, to Joshua that trusted God to fight his battles. If there's anything else, you are dismissed. Have a fantastic week. Thank you.